You're tuned into WestLINK.
Welcome to WestLINK, where we connect and we talk about relevant topics. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon, and I would like to invite you to please like, comment, and subscribe to the Toronto West channel. I am your host for today, Akeem Ambrose, and I am no stranger to the Toronto West Seventh Adventist Church. Through my time here in Alberta, I've been involved in the Indigenous community for many years. I've attended the Mascouche Seventh Adventist Church since my freshman year at CUC, and now it's Burman University. During my time here, I've made many friendships that will last a lifetime. Today's program is about the discoveries of the missing Indigenous children and the pain the community is feeling. Today, I'm going to introduce the guests. Like I said, I am your host. To the right of me, we have Pastor Solo. To the left of me, I have Chief Randy Erminskin. And to the left of him, we have the counselor who is here for the school, which is Mr. Kelly Stecco. And these are your panels for today. Before we go any further, let's pause for a word of prayer. Our kind and Heavenly Father, as we begin to dive into this deep topic where a lot of people are hurting, a lot of people are feeling a lot of pain right now, Father, only you can help us with that pain. Only you can help heal that wound, Father. So as we connect together, we share and talk with each other's experiences, and we listen to the pain and get to the root of the matter, Father, we pray that you help guide this conversation. You help us to find some kind of reconciliation, how the church could help with the pain that these people are feeling. Help us to listen to your voice and your words. Is my sincere prayer. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Now we're going to have a break for a song. The song is going to be Jesus Paid It All.
You woke me up this morning, started me on
Walila Mishaya Eko Pechinasi Kichi Wichihita Christ Kidipa Christ so tabiwin ni kanay kamohuan ekipimachihi Christ kitibahan wilaw kisika misiwe machitawin ekinadamahui
That was a great example of Jesus' love and what he does for us. So now we will have Chief Randy. He is going to talk to us about his experience.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure. It's always, I guess, just thinking about what's been going on with the findings and unmarked graves. And I'm wearing a T-shirt that my daughter kind of made for me at the time. But you know what? I was just thinking back when the Kamloops Residential School findings were discovered. It was just you know what? I've been really strong as a believer, encouraging people, being a solid rock. But when I heard the news, and we hosted an event at our Powell Arbor at the time, and thinking that only 50 people would show up here, there was only over 400 people. And not knowing that, all throughout that time I was emotional, only because I attended the residential school in Ermineskin, and it brought back so many memories of former schoolmates, because I'm speaking to you, I'm 59 years old, and there's only probably 10 of us that still live, that went to school together at the time. So many of them had died from suicide, alcohol poisoning, and all kinds of things and they used to talk, someone used to talk to me about their experiences, and you know what they used to tell me is that, Randy, were you the lucky one? They used to ask me, and I didn't, it took me back, especially when my one friend, he died in 2009, and he went into detail what happened to him, and it just, I can't stop thinking about it. And that's what brought memories back when this all happened, and I just broke down. I was just so sad, and I've been sad since, and just really affected me, because I was remembering names like the former students, Charles Roasting, Donald Redcalf. I've never seen, you know, I don't know where he is, if he's still alive anymore, but it just, Peter Morn. And it just, when I seen the people gather that time, I just kept crying and crying. Even when I did the interviews with Global News, I wore sunglasses. I was crying the whole time. I've never been so emotional, only because I've seen that and lost friends. And so we had a residential school at Ermineskin. I attended there from grade 1 to grade 9. Now as a chief, well, what's interesting about it is that I came full circle, I believe, because I was not only a student, but I taught at that same residential school after I got my degree in education. That old school, I remember I'd coach students, get back late at night, go put the van away, and this building has been torn down since, but my vehicle was on the south end of the building, and people used to say, oh, you can hear kids crying, you can hear noises, you see things in the hallways. And you know what, I locked up everything, I'd have to go across that building, and I just ran. I just didn't want to see anything. I just ran as fast as I could across that building just to get to my vehicle. So, I was lucky. I'd never seen anything but a lot of our co-workers say, you know what, there's be kids screaming late, you know, during the day or at night in the, you know, in the halls. So it really brought me back as remembering many faces. If you go to cemeteries in Ermineskin and around four bands in the Four Nations here, a lot of them died young, and they went through a lot of trauma, and they never recovered many. So this is something that we really have to take seriously as a church, because it brought back memories, and people are so angry at the church right now. It doesn't matter what church it is, they're just angry. And then one of them said, if God is so loving, well, why did this sexual abuse happen? Where was he when he's so loving and protecting? So we really have to think about that. And I've challenged many churches to say, well, if you're going to do this, don't try to sensationalize it. If you're going to do this, you got to be here for the long run, because this is not going to go away. This trauma that just come back, and the feelings and the anger and the hurt, people are going to go deeper, I believe. And we really have to, as a church, come together, pray together, but at the same time, don't try and don't take the chance of going to talk to somebody that's on the street and say, can we talk? Well, you know what? That's going to last a long time. And you don't say, I understand, because you don't understand. We really need to, and we're not prepared as a church. Many of us are really at a point where you say, well, I can talk to people. I've gone through some trauma, but never to this extent, right? So we have to think about a way to come together and work together to present the gospel in a loving way. But how do we do that? I think we really need to come as a church and come together as a church and think about strategies where, you know, and that's why I challenged the congregation that I belong to, is that, you know, if we're not prepared to counsel people that have gone to extreme pain, and then what is it that we're going to do, and how can we help each other? So we've been really thinking about that and trying to organize ourselves. I've spoken to a lot of churches here in the surrounding area and talked to them about the hurts and the pains that they're going through. And we need to prepare. I think God is doing something here His way. And I believe that we have to prepare as a church, as believers, that if we say that God is love, well, we got to dig deep inside into our heart and say, are you willing to sit beside somebody that's been on the streets for so long, that has addictions, that has a lot of hurts and pains, but not only that, that is angry because of what they experience? I think that's a real challenge for us now going forward, but I believe it's an opportunity that we as believers can really do something at this time, because now it's getting serious. And for us, when we're in the beginning of August, we're going to be doing a search with that ground penetrating radar in Ermineskin. And I told everybody, said, we need to have a team that's ready. You've been angry at what's been happening out in different communities, but this is going to be close to home. How far will people fall back and fall away, and with their anger and their pain? So we've got a team of people together, but we need more people. And I think that's something to really think about and really pray about, pray for our community as we get closer to August, and as the organizations that's going to use their GPRS technology and to really prepare us in you know, I mean, you can prepare all you want, but we never know what's going to happen. And I think maybe that's, you know, I've been ministering and delivering sermons this last little while about forgiveness and how we can really come together as a church to talk. And, you know, because there's been attempts and people saying that they're going to come and burn down our church. Although we're never a part of this, but we're targets now. So we really have to come together. Like I said, is they're angry, and it's for a reason. It's justified, but at the same time, we really need to pray for those individuals so that they can one day find healing, one day understand who the real Jesus is. Right at the time, because they talked about in the schools, but it was never. It's unfortunate the way they portrayed and what they seen as the gospel of Jesus Christ. It was just totally wrong. It's unfortunate. I think that's all. If I can remember some more things, I will certainly share with you.
So, Chief Randy, I have a question for you. How did you mentally prepare yourself to go into work at a place that caused you so much pain and trauma? Like, how did you get your mind ready every day just to go to work and to educate these kids in a place that caused you so much pain and so much trauma? How did you do that?
At the time, it wasn't even, the pain wasn't even an issue. You know what, the biggest thing I thought about at the time is that getting slapped and getting my ears pulled and there's so many, and getting kicked by teachers. You know, I never knew I had those rights to, but we didn't know. Our parents didn't know they had a right to education. They didn't know they had the right to protect us, but I think they were just, the pain that they endured. They said they were helpless. There's no hope for us. But I made up my mind I said I made a goal for myself, is that I wanted to be a teacher one day, and I want to be a better teacher than what they exemplified at the time, and that's what my main focus. I'm going to reach into these kids' mind and their hearts, that I'm going to make sure that they're loved, and that's what every day when I went, I just said, you know, these kids are special, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make it an experience for them that is positive. And I think that's something that really helped me and really drove me every day to go back and really make an impression in their hearts that, you know what, it's. And already I was a believer at that time, but it was just I just had to make an impression in their hearts that they were special.
Thank you for sharing that, Randy, Chief Randy. So I have another question for you, and the question is, as a teacher, how did it feel to know that this stuff is happening right here, but schools down the road, in another community, they're not dealing with the stuff that your students are dealing with, and all that kind of stuff? Like, how did it feel knowing that, like, hey, like a block away, people who live in the same country are not dealing with the exact same things that your students and your people are dealing with? Like, explain that to us.
It was well hidden. There's many of our neighbors, Wetaskiwin and Ponoka, that didn't know there was a residential school. They didn't know that they were being treated the way they were. It was well hidden, and I know even the mayor of Wetaskiwin, the former mayor of Wetaskiwin, Bill Elliott, had said, I lived here and I didn't even know. So he's a special witness to the TRC calls to action, and he always maintains that, you know what, whatever I can do, and oftentimes he just chokes up talking about it. So it's, like I said, it's and people try to sweep it under the rug, unfortunately, and say that never happened. You notice that they had a new Indigenous relations minister appointed in Manitoba, and he just said the residential school was a positive thing, and he just got challenged by one of our First Nations leaders in that same cabinet, in that same government, and I think we gotta quit denying it. You know, why I say this is that I'm in my PhD studies, and one of my courses right now, which I'm struggling with, not because it's a hard course, it is a hard course going into your PhD studies, but this was on ethics and forgiveness. And all the books I'm reading is about Nazi concentration camps, apartheid, but barely, maybe one paragraph on First Nations, on residential schools. So I challenged that. I said, you know what, you don't have much of the history, so they don't want to talk about it. I don't know why. And even with the Alberta curriculum, they keep saying that, well, we can't teach it to the lower grades. Well, you're going to teach about apartheid and everything else, but you don't want to teach about residential schools. So, like I said, that's where I struggled with this time, because I was at that point where I was reading about forgiveness, and then the findings came. I've just been stalled. I told my wife, you know what, I know what to write, but man, something's holding me back. Maybe it's for a reason why I have to rewrite something about it. But I told our instructors and the university, Gonzaga University, I said, you know what, I'm going to write about this, and you're going to know about this. Not because I'm angry, but because everyone needs to know the truth.
Okay, so now I'm going to bring the panelists a bit in. So the first question is, how should and can the church respond to the findings at the residential school properties? So I'm going to address this first to Pastor Solo. So I want to say the question one more time. How should and can the church respond to the findings at the residential school properties?
Wow, that's a very difficult question. Yeah, I think it's mainly having platforms like this whereby we can hear from people who have the experience, who have gone through these tough, horrendous experiences. But also from my experience working here with the community in Musqueam, I can tell that most people just need time to know that somebody can listen. There is a lot of elders, especially that I've had the opportunity to spend time with, that have been quiet, and they have not found a safe person to be able to talk to. There is a number of times whereby I have gone into houses and thinking that, yes, I'm ready to help, and left the house in tears after somebody just broke in front of me and just said, I've never talked to anyone about this, but I just feel safe to talk to you at this moment, right? And I think it's right now the church needs to realize that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Let's avail ourselves to listen. And sometimes also I'm tempted to bring up my stories too, to say, hey, this is my experience. No, it's not about me, but it's about listening to what they have gone through, and not take the time to redirect the conversation to ourselves. I think listening. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to say the same question to you, Mr. Stickle. I know you have a different perspective working with some of the kids here at Mamwe Atascocita Native Adventist School. So how could the church help with the findings of the children at the residential school properties? And how was your experience when having all the discoveries and dealing with the students? How did they feel? How did you help with that? What was the response?
That's a lot of questions to answer at one time. I'll start with my experience with the students first, I guess. They knew what had been happening. They had heard the stories, or most of them had heard the stories, and it had been shared in their families. It's us that aren't part of the Indigenous community that unless we had been paying attention to the news and to the Truth and Reconciliation report findings, and unless we were actually actively seeking information, we didn't know, but they knew. Yet there was still the hurt. You can't be prepared for it. Like Chief Randy said, you can know about things, but when those discoveries happen, there's still the hurt and then the anger. And our emotions, we each experience them differently. And God has created us to have emotions for a purpose. And I think in one sense that was the biggest challenge with students was helping them accept their emotions and accept and direct them where they can be useful for their own recovery, for the community's recovery. So that's the first question I think I can answer, and now I've already forgotten what the other 7 were that you that you asked. I can go on a little bit though. As far as our church and it being a corporation, there's the idea of churches means so many different things, and one of them is it's a corporate body, and when Jesus talked about church when he was on earth, he didn't talk about a building or a corporation or organization. He was talking about a group of people, and that's who we need to remember we are. And as a group of people, though, and an organization, we still can't separate those two completely. We were, as a church, we were never part of residential schools, yet they existed while we were here, while we were serving, while we were reaching out, while we were sharing the gospel. And we didn't do anything. And it's been said, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think we need to acknowledge as a church, corporately and individually, that we didn't do anything. We were part of the problem. And that's the next steps that we need to take.
Okay, so there's a comment here from Charlene Jameson, and it says the church needs to respond. Too often we ignore political issues. If Christ were on earth, he would have been an active part in the reconciliation, which is very true. So I know for me, growing up here in Canada, it's almost like we're taught residential schools were a thing of the past and something that didn't really happen in our time. And the fact that Mr. Randy here, who's sitting beside me, is only 59 years old, it really hits closer to home than I was taught. The fact that I was talking to one of my friends and their dad is only maybe 12, 13 years older than me, and their dad went to residential school. So it shows that this is a relevant thing. Like, this is not just an old wound, this is a fresh wound. So all these discoveries and all these unmarked graves is something that is not something that happened 100 years ago or 80 years ago, like they taught us in school, like they made it seem. It's something that's happened literally 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's really relevant and it's really real. So I appreciate everything you've been saying to us, Chief Randy, and we hear your pain and we're here to listen and we're here to understand more of why you guys are feeling the way you feel and how we could help and how we can listen to try to come to a common ground. Mm-hmm. So I have another question. And the question is, how are you going to prepare your team for when the findings come? I know it's you can never really be prepared for something like this, but what are you going to do to prepare them for when this happens? And how could we, the church, help to empower and to encourage when that day comes or when that week comes? Because this is very close to home.
I think that's a hard question, because how do you prepare for something, right? It's as traumatic as it's been already. Everything's intergenerational. You see the effects of everything, because what they wanted to do is kill the Indian in a child, and they were somewhat successful for a lot of, like I said, there's parents they just raided your home back then. They brought a police officer and a superintendent. They just grabbed the kids away from parents' arms and just took them away. And if you resisted, you went to jail. And so there's a lot of things. So and you went from 6 years old right up to 16 years old, and parents didn't have their kids with them. They stayed there all year till they were 16 years old. Think about that. They didn't know how to parent. These kids didn't know who parents were. All they knew was the nuns and the priests and all the supervisors that were in the schools. And I still remember them. When I still picture a lot of them that were involved in that school system back then. And in 2009, I had to go for my hearing with an adjudicator. And you know what? I came out of there a different person, like I said, because I had to reveal things, and it never dawned on me that it never bothered me, never talked about it before. All of a sudden, I had to tell my story in front of a few people, and I've never been the same since because I had to reveal some things that took place, and like what you mentioned, that a lot of them, like what Pastor Solo said, that there a lot of them haven't shared their story when these findings happen in our community, because when they tore the school down and built a new building, they found 4 skeletons. Then I don't know what they did and at that time as far as doing a ceremony or to recognize that. So if they found 4 skeletons there, that was in 1999 when Ermineskin rebuilt the school. And people keep, and I'm going to get personal here and think about it, and I'm just maybe, I'm going to talk about something that's really, really hard to listen for many people. One of our church members, about a month ago, because Willie Littlechild came to speak at our church and say, what is our response? He talked about the 4 R's, relationships, and a lot of times we want to, I guess, respond in a negative way. But one of the ladies in our church got up and she's, you know what, and really be careful how you listen to this. I don't want to alarm you. But she said, I went downstairs, and I went to the school, that old school, and he said, I went downstairs by accident, I think in going to the washroom, here they were throwing babies into the furnace. That was just, oh man, and that's what happened. And that school, that place has been covered. So this is something that's going to be alarming for a lot of people. And what it just, you know what, this lady hasn't come to church since that time. It's really affected her. And so it's like I said, if this happens, if this is what happened to one of the believers, think about what's going to happen to non-believers. It's just, I think we're going to be in chaos. We're not going to have enough people to really counsel these individuals. And the reason I say that is that I had 3 of my older brothers passed away. One was 17. He came home from the residential school. I always tell people he came home, but he didn't come home. He was never the same. He committed suicide when he was 17 years old in 1969. I still remember that. And the latest was 2009. The oldest of our family, he died in 2009. And then recently, the former chief who I took over with, Jerry Ermineskin, he died in 2014. He went to that school, but he could tell something was wrong. But he fought as hard as he could. He was a good leader. He was a good person, but something must have happened, right? So, but that's one thing I always think about is my late brother in 1969, where he hung himself. He just said, I remember he was carrying me around. I was only about 5 or 6 years old. He said, life's going to change for us, and I'm going to take you away from all this. It's going to be a good life. I always remember that. So, one of our former survivors, well, actually one of my former classmates that died, he said, Randy, you have to be our voice. I think that's why I'm here today, is that it took a lot of courage, but at the same time, I know I have to be the voice for those that never said anything. And I think things are going to be revealed that all of Canada, all of the world need to know about what happened here, because the government has hid it far too long, and we have to move forward the best way we can, I guess. And then that's what's going to, how do we prepare? Well, I think we need to fast and pray. And then when the time comes when these individuals come forward and say, I need help, that's when we step in. But how do you get to study the history, study what took place in these schools, and then say, well, what would God do? What would Jesus do in this situation, right? That's when we step in.
Okay, so this question is for you, Pastor Solo. When the day of the discoveries come, how could we partner with Chief Randy and the Mascoutchee community as the Mascoutchee Seventh-day Adventist Church to kind of help them get through this day and get through this process of the findings?
Well, that's a very tough question. I thought you would ask it to the counselor, somebody with experience on that field. But I think it's just for us to be availing ourselves. It's this, as Chief Randy said, it's not an easy thing to prepare for. Just for us to just say we're willing to be God's hands and feet and ears, most especially, to just be there to listen, and also to prepare ourselves emotionally. Because even right now, listening to Chief Randy, I'm like holding my tears. I'm like, it's just too much. It's too overwhelming. We need to get to a place where we can be able to prepare ourselves at least and avail ourselves. And as I think also not minimizing the importance of prayer. We have definitely need to pray about it and fast and continue to work with the community as we've been doing, and working with the church. We have to know what's going on in the community. We have to know, like, was it this past Monday, Chief Randy, where the Catholic youth were marching and there was a threat of potential violence. We need to know what's going on, not to say that we are going to go and join the arms and fight, but if something like that is going on, we can be praying as Christians and allow the Spirit to intervene during such moments.
Okay, so I've been seeing some comments. There was a comment I seen about 2 minutes ago, and it was saying, like, imagine somebody having the authority to come into your own home and taking your child. Like, I know I'm not a parent. Yeah, sir, here it is. Imagine someone having the right by law to take your children from your arms just because they think you are wrong for raising them by your traditions. And I know I'm not a parent. I know I'm a teacher, and I know I see all of my students as my children. And I can't imagine somebody just coming in to Crawford Events Academy and just pulling this kid out my class. I would not be okay with it. I would be frustrated. I'd be angry. I might throw hands. I might fight. Like, I can't sit in good moral or good anything knowing that could happen. And I just can't imagine watching someone just take a child away from their parents' home and them not seeing their parent for all these years and them not even knowing or remembering, like, birthdays or little things about the child. And I just can't imagine, like, that long period of time. It's like when they come back into their house, it's like a stranger. Like, how do you interact with them? So I guess my question to you next, Chief Randy, is, like, when you went back home, or your siblings went back home, how was it interacting after being apart for all these years? It's like having to relearn a different person.
Some of them, many of us, all we spoke was Cree. So when I went into the residential school, I never knew English. So it's different. And one thing, I because of the type of punishment that was inflicted, because the government studied it, so if we're going to do residential school, how are we going to do this? So they brought one from the US where it was more about discipline, about hard work, and then they brought the French system down and then said that's about severe discipline. And so they incorporated the both where, no matter what, we're going to beat the Indian out of you. And so a lot of them were forced to pray. Can you picture a First Nations child going in there? All we had were braids and they were cut off, right? And there's just so many things that were taken away from them, stripped from them, to force them to say, you know what, you abandon your way of life, you abandon your culture, you abandon your language, and you're going to learn about God. And this is the hard way. And it was forced religion, and it was forced upon them, and that's why many of them still believe in the Catholic Church, but I don't know, I think maybe they're just afraid to follow after their traditions and customs, and many of them still don't know who they are. They still don't know how to parent because it's that intergenerational thing. They never had a stable home. Everything was dysfunction after dysfunction, and it just keeps building and building. And people say, well, get over it. How can you get over that, right? And so we have to figure out a way to strengthen our families and bring the family system back. But what do we know? Like some of you say, well, I haven't experienced that, but you've come from a stable home, right? And that maybe that's something that they need to to find, because I still have young people come to my house, and we've come very close as our Ermineskin family, where we have gatherings every 2 weeks just to keep in touch and check on each other. And when I invite some of our members as a chief, they say, "Oh, I'm so envious of your family because you guys love each other," right? Just little comments like that you have to think about. And how do you demonstrate that even further to, and eventually say, well, God is love, right? But it's that process before you reintroduce the gospel back into them to say, well, you're going to learn about God right now. That's what's going to build their faith. I don't think that's the way. We need to slowly build that relationship and that trust with people so that they understand what we're trying to demonstrate.
All right, so Mr. Stickle, this question's for you. As a counselor, how do you deal with so many broken students that have all these broken homes? Like, how do you bring some kind of, I guess, stability, and how do you listen to their pain and understand their pain and direct them to see more of a future?
Well, that's an ongoing challenge. And when I first came here, one that I had to accept as a challenge and acknowledge immediately that it's not me. It's not my job to fix things. It might be my job to listen and to sit with and to be there. But at the end of the day, when that student walks out of my office or whatever the situation is, I have to let God take control of that situation. And even when he's there, 90 to 95% of the time, I'm praying while students sharing. I know that I'm helpless. It's not me. It has to come from above. If I can make a few comments just about what Chief Randy just shared, I heard that, well, we've all heard that comment, just get over it. And it comes to play in lots of situations, whether it's grieving or especially now with our Indigenous community. And telling somebody that's been through that experience to just get over it is like telling somebody that just broke their leg to walk it off. It's not going to happen. It needs support. We need to be there for the support. And I don't know if you want me to keep going on, Ambrose, or Akeem, sorry. It might be a good time to mention that the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada has partnered with the First Nations University and has a course that's available for all of our church members to take called the 4 Seasons of Reconciliation. And it's a 10-module course that shares, and it's not long, it's not hard, but it shares a lot of the history and the information. It's a good place to start learning and becoming educated on what has happened and what is continuing to happen. And then after that, it's partnering with our Indigenous brothers and sisters and allying, I guess is a better word to put it, and looking for ways that we can support.
So something that Chief Randy said really stuck out to me was people were jealous of the fact that his family loved each other. And since this happened so recent, it's not something that happened many years ago. A lot of the kids that we work with on a day-to-day basis that come to our VBS programs and our church programs are kids from these parents and grandparents that might not even know how to parent or have relationships or know how to show love and know how to show guidance. So how could we, as I guess the Seventh-day Adventist Church or the people that work with these people so close-knit, how could we foster relationships that can teach them how to love and how to parent and how to guide and how to support them in that new position, I guess, to have love in their homes and have peace in their homes and have happiness in their homes. So they're not jealous of what we have, but they could have what we have. Any one of you guys can jump in and share.
I would let Chief Randy, if you could go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've been lucky because my mother, she had when her parents died, and then she left when she was 16, and she went to grade 6 in that school. My dad left because you reach a certain age. I don't know what, because they wanted to be farmers. They had gardens, and what's unique about that school where they went to, and it's if you're familiar with Muscogee, where, and especially in Ermineskin, where the Catholic church is, if you go slightly north, that's where the old school was, and there's pictures of it. But what people don't reveal, though, and Willie Lilchow will tell you the same, and those of it that went to school there, is that fence, that the perimeter of the fence that was located around there was an electric fence. So kids couldn't escape as much as they wanted to, and so, like I said, there's a whole lot of things that were done and was just totally wrong, and they should be ashamed of themselves, right? So, and when my mother left, she was 16, and her mother died, so she took in all her siblings and started raising them. So all my late aunties and uncles are just like my brothers, because we were so used to growing. But that's what it was, is that she said, I didn't have this. I didn't have the joy of having, and I didn't have the joy of having my grandmothers on. They both passed on before I was born. So I don't know how they looked and who they were. But my mother always said, you know what, I brought you into this world, and I'm gonna do whatever I can to nurture and admonish everything that you know. And so she brought us up in a good area. It wasn't perfect. There was still dysfunction, right? But she just displayed love all the time. And I remember waking up in the mornings, and there'd be my late brother's friends would be laid out all over the living room, like 20, 30 of them every weekend. But that was a safe haven for them. So, like I said, it's if you can picture that and think about that, well, how can you open your doors? Like, there's certain things we know. You're not going to bring people with addictions into your home, it's just, but you need to figure out a way to do that. But those that you can trust and build relationships, and over time you can, and I do that all the time. I go to a task and I sit in McDonald's, and I sit and people look at you and say, oh, how could you do that? But I just order a bunch of food. We just sit there, and all of them come around there. There's still people. There's still blood in them that flows like ours, and they're hurting, but we still have to do what we can. And just little things like that. It just, if I'm ordering something, just pick over and grab something. And for me, do I want to be picky and choosy about that? It's just that's their life, and I'm not gonna undo that in that split second. It's gonna take time, but they respect that. You know what? When I go to a task right now, they'll never come to me and say, I want money from you. They just say, hey, that's our chief, that's the pastor. You guys don't do anything to him. So there's a trust that's building in, and I'm so thankful. And they were very, very respectful. I don't know all of them, but I go to the shelter from time to time and visit with them, and they just, when the time of COVID, I was just kind of, but they always want a hug, and that was okay, but there's 240 of our people are in that shelter, but you only see a handful walking around town. If they all went out, the town would be just in a panic. But they don't know any other way. So who's ever taught them, right? They've been just told that they're dirty and stupid, and no wonder, right? If you're being told that, it's something that they always heard in a residential school. So it's nothing new to them. Does anybody ever tell them, "Oh, you're special," right? And then no, they don't do that. So we have some work to do, definitely. So that's a start.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Chief Randy. Okay, so right now we're going to take a quick break. and there's going to be a short video on the screen. So we'll see you guys in a bit.
You woke me up this morning, started me on my
And I started grade 1 there.
All right, so we are back and we have another question. And the question is, as church leaders, what can we do at a local level to support the Indigenous community? So that's the second question. So as church leaders, what can we do as a local level to support the Indigenous community? So Pastor Solo, I'll have you start with that.
Yeah, our chief friend was mentioning the shelter in Wetaskiwin. A good number of memories just came through my mind, and on how sometimes it's like when we don't know what's going on because we possibly don't even not exposed to. I think we need to be able as Christians to avail ourselves. Let's go and be with the people where they are, and always see in each person the image of God. We're all created in the image of God. And then another thing I think that we need to also realize is that sometimes we think that people are not doing their best, and I find that especially when we're like doing our sports camp and we're having kids who have alcohol fetal syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, FAS. So yeah, because sometimes they will just wander away, and you'll see the adults or some of us who don't know what's going on getting frustrated with them. But I think we need to go out with that mindset, as assuming that it's easier for us to assume that they're not trying their best. But when you assume that they are trying their best, I find it easier for me to be more understanding than to be more judgmental. So I think from the grassroots, as the church, the first thing that we need to do is to go out, because we can have all the meetings, we can have all sessions like this, but if we don't act on it, then that's still of no value. But let's go out and meet people where they are, see the image of God in them, and assume they're trying their best.
All right, so this is open to Mr. Stickler and Chief Randy as well. So I can repeat the question one more time. As church leaders, what can we do at a local level to support the Indigenous community?
I guess there's a lot that we can do, and it involves being mindful constantly about who we are in our world and who we are as well, the hands and feet of God. As I sit here beside Chief Randy, I'm constantly remembering that 5 minutes after I left home this morning, I realized that I didn't put on an orange shirt. It's a simple thing that I could have and should have done, and it's a simple thing we can all do that keeps that in mind and what's happened, and acknowledging that we have a role to play in that. Recognizing our individual roles our local church roles is also a matter of keeping in mind the process of decolonization and what that means. And it's easy to think of that as a systemic thing, but it also is an individual thing. And when it comes to what we can do, rather than thinking, okay, what do I do to help to fix things, that's a colonizer's perspective, and I can't get rid of that completely as where I come from my background. It's something I need to acknowledge constantly that I have that perspective, but I can, if I'm prayerfully keeping that in mind, I can still ally and with my brothers and sisters, the Indigenous population, the Black population that's also, I mean, the Black Lives Matters movement and other things that I can't. It's not my job to fix things. It's my job to come alongside and partner and say, how can we help you? How can we work together? How can I learn more? And what can I do? But there's the orange shirts is such an easy thing, but also paying attention and listening and supporting when there are events in the community, being there to support when there are actions happening, and whatever we can do there.
Any answer? Yeah. That's a great point, though. It's in our culture, we recognize symbols, we live by symbols, right? And then for now, when someone wears orange, it's just like, it's recognizing a situation back in time where the orange shirt, that the one lady, that's all she had, and it kind of brought to remembrance that there is symbols, right? Number 4 is a 4 directions. For us, they say, we got kind of, in our culture, we say nehiao, but it's supposed to be newio, means 4, right? We kind of use slang over time because it's everything is symbolic in our culture with numbers, and I think if we start studying what symbolism means in our culture, then I think we can study that and how we can help our especially the youth that we work with now, because they're needing direction, they're needing guidance. But I think if we can partner once again with each other, with all the churches and in our communities, that putting our denominations aside and saying, well, these are individuals. There's a heart inside of them. There's we need to reach and work together towards a better tomorrow, if you will. But also don't make a promise and say, well, we'll do this. We'll be there every week. Only let's schedule certain times of the year where we can come together and like I was saying, Christmas. I remember we had a Christmas concert at the HBMC and Peter brought some of your members, and some of the ladies just had beautiful voices. They sang, and I always remember that. That's, like I said, it was just something that I always think about. And man, that was such a beautiful time, and it was just that they're singing. So there's things that we can do from time to time that we just, I think and we'll know when that time will be, and then I think we need to begin to schedule things around each other and then help each other whenever we can.
So there's a question that we see on the screen, and it says, And the Adventist Church addressed the growing mistrust towards churches in general within the Indigenous community? So that is the question on the floor. I'll ask Mr. Stickle if you could answer that first, and then Pastor Solo, you could answer next.
Well, the easy answer is just to be transparent and honest, acknowledging our past mistakes, and also being honest about where we've come from and who we are, and making a prayerful and honest and earnest effort to move forward in partnership and as an ally. Not making promises that we're not going to keep. If we say we're going to do something, do it, follow through. But not necessarily on our agenda. It's got to be God's. I think that's my easy answer.
Yeah, I think also we need to realize that most of the time it's easy to point a finger. Like right now, it's easy for us to say it was the Catholics and not us. But in reality, it was Christians. That's the image that's out there. It was Christians. And we need to realize that now God is giving us an opportunity to be reflectors of his character to his children. So not to say that we have to blame ourselves, but we have to live as God's beloved children, willing to share his love with those in the indigenous communities.
Okay, so there's another question. I'm going to read it. It says, what can we, a church community who generally wants to help, do to help our Indigenous brothers and sisters? How can we facilitate your healing as a community? So Chief Randy, I'm going to direct that one to you first, and then we'll have Pastor Solo second, and then Mr. Stickle third.
Well, there's a key word in there that I'm reading is genuine, right? I think we need to, if we're gonna do something, we have to be sincere about it, right? And if we mean it, if we mean what we say, we're gonna do it. And if we say, well, I did my part 1 week and I'm gone, right? That's not gonna work. This is like I said, this didn't happen overnight. It's over 100 years of things that have happened. And it wasn't until 1949 where we were recognized as human beings. Think about that. There's a document called the Indian Act that if our people went into town, they were jailed too. We were never allowed into public. We had to have a pass to leave our reserve. So there's so many things that happened that caused our people to think that they were inferior. They were caused to be fearful of certain things. And so when we talk about being genuine, well, I guess we have to search our hearts. What is it that we want to do to make sure that when we're doing something, people feel and sense that hey, this person I can connect with. And that's where, if you start making a connection, some people are going to say, no, I don't want it. That's okay. If you get a no, then that's okay. Don't go and jump off a cliff, right? The next, you can keep going. And that's something that we think about. And that's the whole church. It's not nobody's perfect, right? But we have to just pray ourselves up before we decide, okay, this is what we probably can do. We're going to get a no, and that's okay. We continue on, and that's what's important here to recognize, is that a lot of people haven't been genuine with our people, and something we have to really think about and dig deep within ourselves and say, you know what, I can help. I have some things that I've experienced in my life, and you can make those connections.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to what was the panel, the comment that just passed. Just continuing with conversations like this. Yeah, we as a church can first bring more awareness and have more conversations like this one to start. But as Chief Randy just mentioned, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We are in for it for a long haul. We can't expect to see change right away. And I think another thing that we can also realize here is that sometimes as Christians, we want to do things as congregations. But that has never been the case. I think if God is speaking to you as an individual to work and become part of the solution, you need to realize that as your call, and don't wait for other people given you. Your vision is your vision that God has given to you, and don't let other people discourage you from that. And so what am I trying to say with that? So be uncomfortable and be okay with it when people don't understand what you're trying to do. Continue to raise that awareness, and as time goes on, God is working in that with them as well, and people will continue to catch up with time.
So,
Yeah, I think the one key though, sorry,
Mhm.
I didn't mean to cut you off of that. The key to that is that asking for permission to come in, because people forcefully brought themselves in to come and take the children away, right? Now we're being assertive and asserting our jurisdiction and saying that, you know, we're going to protect our people. And you know, because a lot of churches come, I get calls all the time, say, oh, we want to come and help. This is what I'm led to do, right? And they come on their own and they fail. It's because there was no invitation made, right? So if people are aware of what you want to do and how you want to help, and what you're going to do afterward to follow up, I think that's the key, because they just come and take off, and we're left to try to maintain that, or whatever it is their desire was, but we never heard about it. And then all of a sudden people say, well, this church came, what are you guys going to do to follow up? Well, we had no idea they were there, right? So we need to come together somehow.
Okay, so before Mr. Stickle answers, I'm going to read
comment, and it says awareness needs to start with their school system as well. Transparency, in the curriculum teach empathy and develop servants.
Mhm.
So I think that's very important that we do begin to learn more about the Indigenous community and their struggle and their pain and what they had to go through on the soil here in Canada, because we all have struggles, but not even close to what they went through. And we can't even imagine the things that they had to go through just a block away or 2 blocks away. Hearing what Chief Randy said of the restrictions of they can't even get into town without a card, and if they go into town, they go to jail. So just imagine not being able to live and do the normal day-to-day things, the essential items. I know when the pandemic started and Dollarama was closed and we couldn't get certain things, we're all frustrated just for that 1 month or 2 month time period. But these people were restricted for life. Like, they could not do the day-to-day essential things permanently. So imagine how we felt during the pandemic, where things were locked down and we couldn't go here, we couldn't go there for 6 months to a year. Imagine that being your everyday life. And I just want us all to marinate on that thought. Mr. Stickle, you're welcome to answer that question.
It's important to remember that we're all different from each other, and we all have different gifts and talents, and God blesses us each in different ways. And when we ask a question like, what can we do genuinely to support as individuals? First of all, that's a good question to ask, but it's also the scary question to ask, because if we're doing that genuinely and asking God to direct us, He's going to make us uncomfortable. And we need to be ready for that and go where He sends. And I really appreciate what Chief Randy just said about remembering to ask permission, to ask for not just to force ourselves in, not to force ourselves on somebody to tell them their story, or tell us their story. Ask. Do it as an ally, not as as a savior. That's not our job.
If I could just jump in right there. This reminded me of there are some youth workers that I normally work with in the community, and I had this awesome idea, man. I was going to bring the community together. We were going to have a blast, and all the 4 nations were going to come, and we were going to really have a good time. I had planned it out all like it was set, and I called this friend of mine. I'm like, yes, man, I have this idea. And he just listened to me go on it for about 10 minutes. And when I was done, he's like, why do people just come and be with us? I felt so stunned, so disarmed. But thankfully, I knew because of the relationship that I have with him, I meant that I understood what he meant. He really appreciates my presence and getting to be of support than for me to plan as if I know it all, while they also have programs that they already have, right? And it was from then that I met with him, and I said, what do you have on your plate? And to my surprise, all the programs that I'm thinking of, he has them covered, and all that I can do is to be of support to him than for me to come in with my own agenda. Yeah.
Wow. So there's a comment on the screen. Oh, it disappeared. Yes, Adventist Ontario, sorry. And it says, these stories are so painful to hear, yet they're so informative. So as to challenge us as a church. So this is a very difficult conversation. It is very hard, but I feel like this is a great place to start. But like I said, this is only a start. And like Chief Randy said, like this is a marathon. We can't just be sprinting. This is something that we have to start by asking for invitations, asking how we could help, asking how we can be there. And I think one of the first steps is helping to support them on the day of the discoveries when it's the Ermine Skin Day, and how we can just support them in that capacity. Not to say like, hey, we're here, this is us, and we're gonna help you, and you have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it makes no sense why we as humans, we don't make sense as human beings, because if we even listen to just what Chief Randy says of they took force into their homes. So why would we as human beings think forcing our way to help would work with people who have, I guess, a hurt or some kind of negative feeling towards force? So why would we think force is the solution, even though it's a good intention? Force is not the answer here. And I think we've all come to the same common ground that force is not the answer, and just listening and being available and being ready and willing to get our hands dirty and to listen, to understand and connect as family in that level.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
I just learned during the service that the ground penetrating radar is coming to Ermine Skin School, and as the school counselor, I want to be there. I want to be there to support, but as a person learning to decolonize himself, I also have to realize that I can't just show up at a time like that. It needs to be invited. If it would be wrong of me to force myself into that situation. Some of the people affected will be my students, the kids that I know and love and care for, and that matters. Yet to just come in and say I need to be there to help that's wrong. But as a partner, maybe there's still a way to do that.
Okay, so we have one more question on the screen, and the question is: when we look back on this day 10 years ago, what will be seen as having been the most effective in the healing of those who were suffered in these great atrocities? So that's the question. So you guys can jump in and answer that question.
For us, I think the one, Willie Littlechild went to Rome to go see the Pope. You know, you heard in 2008, I believe, when the Prime Minister then was Harper. when he apologized to the nation and the survivors at the House of Commons. And they've been trying to get the Pope to come to Canada, and he's refusing. I know it's because probably once he says, they don't want to hear 3 words, "I'm sorry." Right? And I think that's what they want to hear, because for the survivors that remain. But I know it's once he says that, there'll be so many lawsuits against him. I know, I understand that. But, that's what a lot of people want to hear, and he still refuses to come. And I know he's getting advice from other people. But that's what, for those of us that, when someone says, "I'm sorry to you," we feel better, right? I think that's putting some closure to some of the individuals to hear that, because if and when someone's going to reveal some things to you about what they experienced, the older ones that are in their 70s and 80s are the ones that really went through, actually no, I would say 50 years and up, that really went through some severe sexual abuse. And they're the ones I think that are going to hear that. Like for myself, I write left-handed, but I was right-handed when I started school. I didn't want to fall behind, so I broke my arm, and I forced myself to, because I didn't want to get slapped and hit with a ruler, and so I can do both. But just so you know, but I didn't want to get left behind, because like you said, my ears were twisted, and I got punched by a teacher once, and I never knew I had those rights, and so today I'm so protective. If somebody gets picked on and in public, I'll go there, and that's how it was, because my brother was picked on all the time, my older brother. So now I don't take anything from anybody. I'm not saying I'm going to go there and fight, but I just hate to see people get picked on. So, and there's like I said, you can't pick one healing. It's just there's so many different things you can help and identify. And that's where you can start, in those little things. And it's going to take a little bit of time for some. It'll take a little more work and spending time with individuals. But they've suffered a lifetime. And what's wrong with us spending a few minutes at a time with individuals, right? If we went through some things in our own lives, there's certainly some things we can help individuals come across and help them heal some way, right?
I think 10 years from now, if somebody develops a program that can be remembered, I'd be surprised. It'll be the relationships. It's that investment, that coming alongside and building relationships with people that will be remembered in 10 years. And will still be going in 10 years.
All right, so this is a great discussion, guys. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for leaving comments on the YouTube and the Facebook. And right now we're going to take a break. And we're going to come back for some closing thoughts and some closing comments. So, guys, you guys have been great with the comments and the questions. And we're going to take a short break, and we'll get back to you guys shortly.
And has blood has run some people for God. From every tribe and language, people, every nation. Where warriors have fallen, there's a resurrection coming. It's your time, so rise and shine. Wake up, you sleeping giant. The wounds of injustice are being healed by the peace of Yahweh, who's bringing us power through unity. Where warriors have fallen, there's a resurrection coming. Tribals come alive. Yeah, wake up, you sleeping giant. Your heartbeat, I feel it. Yeah, I feel your heartbeat. I feel it. Yeah, I feel your heartbeat. I feel it. Yeah, I feel your heartbeat. I feel it. I destiny. The rhythm of our Father moves with victory. Where warriors are fighting, there's a revival igniting. So God, and arise, blazing fire. Your heartbeat, I feel it. Yeah, I feel your heartbeat, I feel it. Yeah, I feel your heartbeat, I feel it. I feel your heartbeat, I feel it. I feel it, yeah, I feel it. Yes, you are. Bring us together, bring us together. We cry. Yes, you are. Bring us together, bring us together. Together we cry. Yes, you are. Bring us together, bring us together. We cry out for your heartbeat, oh. Give up your heartbeat. Yes, you are. Bring us together. Bring us together. We cry. Yes, you are. Bring us together. Bring us together. Together we cry. Yes, you are. Bring us together. Bring us together. We cry out for your heartbeat, oh. Give up your heartbeat. Yes, you are. Bring us together. Bring us together. We cry. Yes, you are. Bring us together. Bring us together. Together we cry. Yes, you are. Bring us together. Bring us together. We cry out for your heartbeat, oh. Give up your heartbeat.
You woke me up this morning, started me on.
All right. We'd like to take one last question. So the question is, how can we assist the people in our churches that identify as Indigenous but have not openly shared this? Is there a way to make more safe spaces? Or make our spaces more safe?
Yeah, I think there's a lot we can do in that regard. But there's one thing that I've seen at Pastor Randy's church, Chief Randy, Pastor Randy. Yeah, every Sunday they have a time whereby people can share. I don't know if you still do that, Pastor Randy, but that's one thing that I have really admired about your church, whereby I've seen people that kind of like start off not being able to share, and eventually you get to see that person going up front and sharing their story. And I think it's that will help. That helps, and also it helps also with the members, because most of the time we are not safe. People don't feel safe around us, and that is one reason why people can't share. But if we get used to the culture of sharing our stories, then I think that can also help people to feel free to share.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's we've always maintained that, to have testimony time before we actually get into the sermon, and it allows people to talk about challenges but also just praise reports about this is what I've able to do, and it kind of tells us, and it tells us that there's growth that's happening. I think that's something to recognize as a church body, that because we don't want to be just social clubs. We want to see that if there's growth, and if we're just sitting here and in church and just let's come to listen to music and go on my day, we need to make those relationships and those connections with one another, so that we know that we are helping and doing something to help these individuals.
Okay, so we're going to share the land acknowledgement. So we want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Indigenous people. So right now, our school, where we're on Treaty 6, region of the Métis settlement, and the Métis Nation of Alberta, regions 2 and 3 and 4. We respect this history's languages and the culture of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Nations of Canada, whose presence continue to enrich our communities. So we are on Treaty 6 territory right now.
You know this, in 2015, I was the Grand Chief of Treaty 6, which I was a spokesperson for 17 First Nations in Alberta in Treaty 6 territory. So I had that privilege of being their spokesperson, and it was so nice. And this was just something that we had talked about the residential schools, and now here we are, just coming to grips with some of the fine. So it's we're in a unique time, but I know it's for a reason, and I know people are going to begin to share some things. And so, thank you for allowing me to be here.
So in closing, Mr. Stickle, do you have any last-minute thoughts or comments you want to share?
Well, let's just partner with who we can, where we can. Be you. Build that relationship with God first, and strengthen your abilities. But ally and partner with our brothers and sisters. Doors will open.
Yeah, I think, the one thing that I could say is that we've been going back to availing ourselves and building those relationships. I think just be available. Don't be the missing link.
Chief Randy?
For myself, I was hesitant to come back and to put my name in as for chief, knowing that right now, well, I didn't know this was going to happen too, but times are different, and there's very little respect shown towards any authority. So I knew that coming in, but things change, and with all these findings, and people look to you and say, can you update us? What are you going to do? Every day it's like that. So it's been challenging. It's been difficult at times trying to respond, and also finding the strength every day. Say, you know what, I wake up every morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, what can I do to help improve the situations in our community? I think we all desire that. But as a leader, you're responsible to, and people are listening. There's 4,500 members in Ermineskin that just every day they wake up, make our life better, right? So I always think about that. It weighs heavy on me, but I thank God that I can pray every day. You know, I'm always hopeful, and I'm the only chief nearby here that's a believer, right? Everybody believes in their own traditions and customs, but I rely heavily on what the Lord shows me. I get criticized many times. I get laughed at many times because of my belief, but I thank God that, you know, I'm here, and it hasn't fazed me. Sure, it affects me every once in a while, but it hasn't brought me to a place where I'm going to give up. I'm still hopeful, and I know that all of you, and I know from all of you listening as well, can pray for me every day, because it's not an easy road. But I'm thankful that, you know, I have Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I wake up every day with hope. So thank you.
Could you guys put
A last comment back on the screen for me, please. Yes, so there's a comment that says, progress takes time, but perseverance brings results. So I've been watching the NBA playoffs, and one thing Coach Monty Williams shared with the Phoenix Suns is everything you want is on the other side of hard. This conversation, this experience, this situation is hard. But us not persevering, us not pushing, us not being willing to get our hands dirty is not going to get us on the other side. And like we discussed today, I think our job is not to push to have success and push to find solutions, but our job is to ask and humble ourselves and be ready and willing to get our hands dirty to work with this community as brothers and sisters. Because everything we want is on the other side of hard. But you can't get the hard and you can't get results until you put the work in to get past.
So I think
As a church, as
an
a
entity, as a body, it is our job to work together.
and listen first and speak after. I think that is very important that we listen first and speak after, and then we can finally get to the other side of hard. We're going to pray to close. Thank you all for coming and being a part of this conversation. Thank you guys again for the comments, the questions, the concern. And I want to thank the panelists for being here. Pastor Solo, Chief Randy, Mr. Stickle. It's been a pleasure to talk with you guys and share our experiences with the people here at Toronto West Southern Adventist Church. So please, let's all bow our heads and close our eyes for prayer. Dear Lord, this conversation is hard. And Father, we want to get on the other side of hard, but Father, we can't do this alone. So give us your spirit. Help us to listen to your voice. Help us not to just do things on our own agenda, but help us to follow your plan and what we can do. And help us to listen to your voice to get this done. Father, help us as we have a big day coming in a few weeks, Father, where the discoveries is happening right here in Ermineskin, right where we interact and work with people around, Father, who's going to be affected by this, Father. I pray that you be with them, as this is going to be a very hard day, Father. Be with the chief as he is in power and he is the leader of this community, Father. Give him the strength and the courage, Father. Help him to not feel alone. Help the people to not feel alone in this stuff. There is a city, there is a church in Toronto West that's behind these people who are supporting and praying and loving them from all over a different part of Canada, Father. I pray that we don't just have this conversation and it ends here, but we continue to have success and we continue to work with these people as brothers and sisters, Father. And help us not to just leave it here, but help us to make it to the kingdom of heaven together and to each other when you come again. Is my prayer in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen.
He's done so much for me, I cannot tell it all.